was still living in the hood, so I
Yeah.
couldn't escape my reality. But there was always a seed of question about how I was living. And actually not accepting the lies. Because I remember a lot of homies would tell me, well, this is the way it is, homie. It's always going to be like this. But then when I started in the truth, I was like, it hasn't always been like this.
Hi everyone, this is Raina Carrillo with Purpose and Passion. I'm really excited today because you already know what time it is. It's about educating, empowering, and teaching awareness. And today I have my friend JT, aka Johnny Torres. He is a gang interventionist and he's full of wisdom. And separate from that, he's a rapper, which I call him an artist because the way he freestyle and how he flows is not just like your typical rap. It's just deeper. It's deep rooted. It's culture. It's it's our indigenous. It's us. You know. So I'm really excited to have you, JT, in the building.
Thank you.
He's a very humble spirit.
Thank you, Irene.
You're welcome. So JT, take the viewers down memory lane. Like, where are your family from, and where were you born and raised?
I was actually, I was raised in East LA, but I was actually born in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And it was kind of unique, the circumstances, because my family at that time was real assimilated to American culture. They didn't really know much of their indigenous roots, so they were kind of breaking away. But as I learned my heritage, it was my lineage. It was kind of a trip because my band on my mother's side is Chiinde, which is Warren Springs, New Mexico Apaches, and on my dad's side they were Chihuahua Apaches from Arizona, and they never my mom and dad were not conscious of this fact, but my dad it's like that genetic memory, right? So eventually, my grandfather, being in Arizona, and then he got deported in the 30s. Even though he was born in the U.S., he was still deported in the mass raids of Raza that they were sending back to Mexico and blaming us for the depression, and he couldn't come back into the states until the 40s, and to go fight in World War II, and so in that he eventually moved to. The family started moving to California on my dad's side in LA. And then my mom's side, her father, originally, unfortunately, things didn't work out between him and my grandmother, our great grandmother. And so no, grandmother, I'm sorry, grandmother, so he moved to East LA with my mom. And so my mom and dad were drawn to each other. Apparently, that's how I got here, right?
Yes.
But they were unconscious of the fact that Chihuahua Apache males, if they wanted to marry, they would pursue Chihinde Apache women, or same with Chihinde Apache men would pursue Chihuahua, so the blood wouldn't be, inner like they were doing in Europe and stuff, right?
Yes.
So
Like intertwining,
right. So to
right?
make sure the
Uh-huh.
bloodline wasn't too close, so they would do that. So it's kind of crazy that my dad lineage of Chihuahua, my mom's Chihinde, and then they found each other and were just drawn to each other.
Wow.
And we were married for a while, but when he went over to Vietnam with my uncles, she went back to New Mexico, had me in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When he returned, she moved back to LA. Things didn't work out, unfortunately, between them. I didn't really know my dad too much, but I grew up in East LA.
Wow. What part of East LA? Because when we say East LA, we think like Boyle Heights, and
Right.
so
Don't
or
you
Ramona
understand?
Gardens. Sometimes we even consider, like, people from the West Side. We consider Ramona Gardens the East.
Right.
That area. But then we started to find out that it's just the East Side. So
Right.
So please enlighten us.
So East LA, I know. That's what I always say. It's a crazy argument for most of the world. East of the LA River is East LA, right? But if you're in East LA, there's always that big argument between Boyle Heights, East LA, and to me, again, it was just a way to take away voting power from the Raza,
Yeah.
because the East Side was the big central at that time, the big centralization of Raza votes. Now, of course, Raza is taking over the whole city, but at that time, most of it was centered to the East Side, and so. At one point, they split Indiana. So Indiana Avenue on the east side, if you're east of Indiana, it becomes LA County. So
Okay.
so all them folks can only vote on county issues. They can't vote for the mayor. They got their supervisor. They got county issues east of Indiana, and then west of Indiana becomes the city. So they're still voting on the mayors, etc. So Boyle Heights would be considered the city. East of Indiana, east of Indiana is considered East LA, and then even in East
Oh.
LA, there's three sections with the City Terrace, which is part of East LA, and then there's the Southern Corridor of East LA, and then there's Belvedere Gardens, which is like the center of East LA. I grew up in the Belvedere Gardens area, the center of East LA. But there's East LA and there's Bull Heights and there's outside. I know Lincoln Heights, but it was really, to me, the reason they did that was to take away voting power from La Raza, back in the mid 1900s. But now there's actually conversations about either East LA becoming its own city,
Mm-hmm.
instead of being unincorporated, or actually becoming a part of the city of LA and being
Yeah.
umbrellaed by the city of LA, which would allow that raza
To
to
vote.
vote for city issues
Mm-hmm.
again. So
Wow. So then, what elementary school did you go to?
elementary, well, that was that was like I remember it was a period when I was little. My mom actually, so I'm kind of split because my grandma almost stayed in East LA, and
Mm-hmm.
my mom, for elementary, I actually went to Huntington Park for
Oh, HP.
HP.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Okay. Which is not that
Yeah,
far.
yeah, yeah. So I was back and forth from East LA and Huntington Park up until I was like a junior high, right before I was going to go into high school. So it was like I went to Miles Avenue, and then I went to Gates Junior High, and then after that, I started getting in trouble. So, but when my mom's moved to East LA, I still wanted to go to Huntington Park High School. So I went to Huntington Park High School.
Were the
Actually,
Florencias there back then?
oh yeah, they were
Okay.
there.
I'm just asking.
That was like probably
Because I remember
that
that.
was like the first hood I remember seeing and witnessing people doing drive-bys and all that back then
Yeah.
in the early '80s and shit.
Yes.
And really my age, but
I was like, yeah, mine was the 90s.
you know what I'm saying? But they were the first that I remember being explained, and my uncles, of course. But yeah, I was there, and then I was actually playing football for my freshman year at Huntington Park. But then started getting in trouble, and so after HP, I got kicked out, which was cool because I was also getting into graffiti. So
Yes.
so they gave us back then what they call OT, right? Opportunity transfer. So I always said it was like every school wanted an opportunity to have a student like me, right? So I would, I would
That's a good one.
so I would get this free bus pass, and it was great because I was mobbing, I was tagging at a time when graffiti was barely coming to LA.
Yes.
So they
In the
actually-
80s, right?
In the,
Okay,
in
it's
the
okay.
80s and shit. So they actually gave me a bus pass to go all over the city and mob. So when they sent me to Southgate, I went over there and I was mobbing, and then only lasted there for like a month. I got kicked out. Then I went to Val for a little bit for a semester, and then I decided to just go back to East LA. I went to Roosevelt for a little bit, got kicked out of Roosevelt. I finished at Garfield in East LA.
So you graduated from Garfield High.
Right.
Wow. So was the communities different? Like, HP area versus
Oh yeah,
East
yeah.
LA? Like, what was
To
the
this day,
difference?
it's kind of like I know because I also started a graffiti crew in the mid-'80s called K4P, which is still out there, especially in the South Side. It was a trip because I started the crew and I was going to Southgate, and I lit in a youngster Mesk in in the crews, the youngest member at the time I let him in, which was a great decision to me because when in the '90s, like you were saying, when everybody really started banging hard, I kind of unfortunately kind of broke away from the graffiti and was doing something else,
Yeah.
But Mesk continued the legacy of K4P. So K4P is dominant in South Central. They've written books on it. We've been exhibiting in Japan. It's a most definitely contributed to the origins of LA graffiti,
Wow.
And but at that time, by having so many memberships, we got membership in Mexico City, but the dominant membership is in South Central, so coming out of HP,
Yeah.
so it was a trip because I had my folks in East LA that I was hanging out with, and then I had my folks in South Central, and there was always those there was most definitely differences, what I'm saying? Because in East Los and the way my uncle raised me to this day, things are changing now with the newer generation, but there was a lot of glecha, a lot of cultura, a lot of rules,
Yes.
especially racial rules, right? So
Yes.
there was language you couldn't use in East LA. You could use calo, but there was the way you conducted yourself. And because of predominantly raza,
Yeah.
there was just words you couldn't use and things where it's South Central. When I could go with my homies in South Central, it was like, damn, like y'all could talk like this over here, you know?
Yeah. I understand we're in a different era where that cannot be said because it's like, look at your skin,
Right,
look at your roots.
right,
Don't disrespect, the African American community
right.
because now you're older and you should be wiser in the words you use because when we're youth, we're immature. And we don't know what that word truly means, the definition, but we get so used of saying it to each other, And I remember telling, the people from the avenues, they're like, "Why you talk black?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Well, how does black sound?" And it's like you, And I'm like, "Well, you want me to say, orale, get in my ranfla, Spencer, eso?" I said, "You want me to talk like that?"
Right.
And then they start laughing. They're like, "You're a fool," And I'm just like, "Well, we grew up in Inglewood."
Right.
So it's predominantly at the time African American. So we grew up. So when Christmas time came, we eating their food and they're eating our tamales and pozole. You know what I mean? And that's how we kind of like just linked in together, growing up in elementary and then growing up in high school. And then we're in the streets, and it's like we give them a pass, they give us a pass because we're childhood friends, But like literally, like when I'm very more careful because it makes me think about what my friend Young Dopey's a rapper, and he was sharing that in a verse, like look in the mirror. Stop saying that word because it doesn't represent us.
Right.
And even it really doesn't represent the African Americans because it was a word that was said to them to disrespect them.
That's right.
So we should be careful how we use, our words. And so when you share that, I'm like, I understand, thinking about the past, East LA, and the culture and how things were differently back then, Things has totally changed.
Now,
Yeah.
now I've seen kids as far east as La Puente using the word.
Yeah. You're like, wow, Montebello, wait a minute. We over here, Compton and Watson and Woodwood and Inglewood on this side.
Things have changed.
Yeah,
and they
definitely.
use it referring to each other. It's a joke,
Yeah.
like F them. And,
Oi.
and talking about, there you go, you're going down. You're going down.
My low rider right
riding.
now. I was like, but we good now.
You ain't gonna go more down.
Yeah, I'm about to go more
You're
now.
making
Oh,
it
Lord
bouncy.
Jesus, yes. It's about to start bouncing. Sure. Oh my gosh. But what I also want to share, what I want you to share is, you said you had got into trouble. So you were in football, you kind of start getting into the trouble of graffiti, and then the graffiti kind of shifted to something else. So was it where did you find your talent in music? Because that's what I want to know. Was it years later, or was it during your young adulthood, like after high school?
I think the most it's a trip to because last year, rest in peace, Jack, STN LOD. It's like another mentor of mine's Carmelo Alvarez. Said back in that time, we were all mentoring each other, young people, because we didn't have mentors. So
Yes.
we would mentor each other, And Carmelo, he started this place called Radiotron Club and on the west side, right across from MacArthur Park.
Mm-hmm.
This must have been like 1984. And I remember me and Jack, the trip that we actually met in elementary and Miles Avenue. But I started going to the east side. He moved to the west side. And but we kept in contact. And so in that time, in 84, he called me. I must have been 13 at the time. He called me and said, "Hey, there's this place over here, Radiotron Club, and the dude gives you free spray paint." I was like, "Nah, really?" Because back then, at our age, there wasn't like graffiti shops like there is now.
Yeah,
so,
no. Mm-mm.
So we had to rack all the paint or steal all the paint we got. So it wasn't easy to come by paint when you're a 13-year-old in the 80s,
So thanks to you guys
Yeah.
at Home Depot, all the spray paint is locked. Thanks to y'all.
And the tips, right there. You couldn't buy tips, so you had to find certain tips. So people are probably like, "Why are the tips gone from this product?" But because we're creating certain lines and things. But when he told me, "Hey, they're giving paint over here," I was like, "Damn, I'll go over there and get that free paint." But when I went, it was like wow, it was just so amazing. It was basically the mecca of bringing hip hop into LA. Dr. Dre came out of there when he was a world class wrecking crew. Ice-T started there. That's when he met his first wife, Donna, and and
Wow.
and Egyptian Lover. Everybody was Alco Jam's Army. Everybody was there. We were little kids, and either you were getting to graffiti or you were getting to rapping, break dancing, and at that time, you could see the four elements of hip hop. Being inspired by New York, and it only made sense because even in New York, hip hop was really it came out of a peace treaty between gangs in the Bronx. Where
Yes.
these dudes literally wrote doctrine that we're gonna have we're gonna have peace with each other, and they had to sign off on it. And so they use arts as a form of conflict resolution. If I'm gonna instead of me going to war with you or committing violence against you, if I'm a graffiti artist, we're gonna mob, and whoever, if it's a piece by piece, bomb by bomb, our all city, we're gonna deal with our conflict like that. Or if it's MCing, we're gonna wrap it out, and break dancing, same thing. Now, in fact, next year, break dancing is going to the Olympics,
What?
so it's became a global sport, but unfortunately, it's not in that street element no more.
Yes,
And
yes.
so it was a peace movement, and it was drip because even going to Radiotron, I was in the center. Didn't even know I was in the center of a major war between 18 MS, Crazy Riders, Wandas, but
Yes.
but it didn't phase us. It was like that didn't exist because we were in this mecca of hip hop. We were just in the
Yes.
elements, and so unfortunately though, the city didn't see the value of Radiotron, and so they shut it down. They saw it more valuable to build a strip mall. It was more valuable to build a laundromat. So even though in the area of violence among young people declined, uh, they didn't see that. So then after Radiotron, violence increased amongst young people.
Yes.
But now they got the laundromat, so they got clean clothes now. But that was a fair exchange.
More
It was-
violence, clean clothes.
You know what I'm saying? That was like city felt that was the best way to go. So
Man.
all of us went back into our hoods, and going into the late '80s, with popular culture, really, it's just no coincidence when I look at the numbers of the early '80s. There was 500,000 prisoners throughout the U.S. And when popular culture really exploded and shifted this positive message in hip hop, and hip hop went gangster, and then you started movies like Colors and American Me and Minister Side and all these different things. It doesn't stop. In fact, there's whole line items on Netflix where you can look at nonstop footage of the cartels and gangs, and you go from the '80s of 500,000 prisoners to now you got 3 million.
Yes.
So what happened? You know what I'm saying? You're gonna say that once the prisons went privatized in 1985, and once popular culture and some of these industries were investing in the prison system, all of a sudden it's just a coincidence that all this mass incarceration goes up and all this massive time put on substance abuse and instead of treatment and drug use, and it just so now we got 3 million. It's one of the biggest industries in the U.S. You know what I'm saying? It's you got they invest 80 billion a year. The state of California 8 million alone. In the early '80s, California felt the need to build another 23 prisons. So now there's actually 33 prisons in the state of California alone. It just to me it's a mad coincidence.
It's the new slavery.
You know what I'm saying?
That's the new
Which is
slavery.
Article 13, right?
Yeah.
Slavery's been abolished except for the convicted felon. Then you become a legal slave.
Yeah.
Believing Before Seeing, a new book by Candace Barr, teaching you how to believe into existence. Available now for pre-order.
But back how I got into rapping, right?
Yeah, but I mean that is the history
Right,
of it. If you think about it,
That's right.
because that's when we got into like they're like, yeah, the rap started in New York, but the gangster rap started in California,
right? That's
and
real.
it's a whole nother beast.
That's real.
It's a whole nother beast.
But at one time, we were born inspired by the East, and then unfortunately, I guess we inspired them the other way around.
And it's crazy because my dad was from Lynx, my mom's from 18, and we used to live on 104 around Prairie in Inglewood. And my dad, they owned a nice, radio, the big speakers. Remember back then, it was the nice radio, just the whole shebang. And I remember the first song that I can remember hearing in our new apartment, the Battle Ram.
Ah,
You can't stop
yeah,
us,
baby.
baby. The
Yeah.
Battle Ram. You know what I mean? And so I grew up with New York music in the 80s as a child.
Right.
So when people trip out and be like, how you know this music? I'm like, I'm 44. So my parents were young. They were like 18, 19, when they had me. So they were in their early 20s raising a child. They were still kids in their 20s.
That's right.
So I grew up with what they were listening to, from that music to oldies, right? And then my generation comes in the 90s, and, we're listening to Tupac and still oldies. Now we're going through our own era, from the West Side parties and the Truths, and then it starts to change up in the 2000s, right? And so it's like the shifts of just, I'm grateful I was able to experience the 80s.
Yeah.
And I was blessed to be alive to experience the 90s. So when I think about how you're educating us on purpose and passion, it's powerful because you're the first to share this information on Luxe Media. You know what I mean? Like, you're the first to share this. So, how did the thought of gang intervention come into your life? Like, how did that happen?
Was a few ways. I guess I've had this is divine interventions. I guess in my
I
own life,
like
right?
that divine intervention.
Right. So even like in hip hop, like it's in the beginning, Radiotron was my exposure to hip hop, graffiti, rap, and that's when I started writing poetry. And why I acknowledge rest in peace Jack, because he supported my poetry even back then as a young kid writing. He's like, you're a
Yes.
dope rapper, And so I kept it. It inspired me to keep doing it, until eventually I joined Quinto Soul and other groups in the '90s. But it's coming up, and through how I got into gang intervention, it was like, there was something always in my heart, and hip hop, I guess, always had seen the development from pretty much the breakdancing, let's party, to there was a conscious period. We had groups like Public Enemy, Paris, Poor Righteous Teachers. I mean, Arrested Development, so many the cool, and but unfortunately, at some point, the industry started putting money behind the conscious rap, and they started putting more behind the gangster rap, and it hasn't stopped. Now they're just putting straight to the dope fiend and the trap, right?
Yes.
But in that period, it planted a seed in my head. I was still living in the hood, so I couldn't escape my reality. But there was always a seed of question about how I was living and accepting, and actually not accepting the lies. Because I remember a lot of homies would tell me, well, this is the way it is, homie. It's always going to be like this. But then when I started learning the truth, I was like, it hasn't always been like this. There was periods when it depends how far back you can go.
Yeah.
If I go pre-colonization, there was times we were on top of pyramids. There was times when we had peaceful conflict resolution with each other, like the Mexica or the Azteca. They had a thing called the Flowery Wars. And so even though the Spanish had made up these lies that we sacrificed and we're bloodthirsty, all these no proof evidence, straight up lies. But in the Flowery Wars, the Mexica mastered the art of war so much. The reason they called it the Flowery Wars is if I had a difference with you, I would first give you flowers, right? I got a beef. I come give you flowers. And so once you saw the flowers, you already know I got a beef, right? I give you flowers, I give you some gifts, and I'll tell you my beef with you. And then you wouldn't even respond. Our people were not responding.
Yeah.
Like now when we can start take off on sight, right?
Yeah.
I would give it to you, and then I would leave, and then you would ponder for a while. And even when you were ready, I never bring it up again. It could take you months, but when you are ready to respond to me, you come give me flowers. I mean, this interaction will happen about, several times. And by the end of this interacting several times, they usually came to a peaceful resolution. If they couldn't, there was absolutely no way they could come to an understanding. Then they would draw the circle around, basic catch a fade, get down, and whoever, submitted to the fate, that was it. Nobody got killed. That's really how the Mexicas handle business, called the Flowery Wars. But the Spanish came with all this other nonsense.
Wanted to make our ancestors look like monsters.
Beasts, exactly.
Yeah,
So it could justify through the Vatican could give them the blessing to do all the horrific Holocaust that they committed against our people and continue to commit. But this is where we were really at. So when I look at who we were, it hasn't always been like this. In fact, you go to Tenochtitlan or any of the major Palenque, any of the major areas where our people were, you say, show me the prison. Where did they incarcerate the disobedient? You ain't going to find that. They never built one. because it wasn't like that. We already had restorative justice practices then.
But the Europeans built theirs, and there where
Because
they
the
come
European
from.
way of thinking is not restorative; it's punitive.
Mhm.
There is no justice system here; it's punishment. So that's why they had to build these houses of incarceration that are now mass slavery factories, right? But it wasn't. So when I started questioning, like, it hasn't always been like this, homie. I'm looking at it and I couldn't really feel it. And then in 1993, I was walking in downtown actually looking for work. And I saw some brothers from the FOI, the Fruit of Islam.
Yes.
And they were selling the Final Call. And I knew the paper based on, Public Enemy in Paris, Islamic MCs. And they tried to reach out to some Paisa brothers selling the paper. And of course, the Paisas, they're not going to buy this, right?
Yeah.
But I was touched. I go, man, these dudes trying to reach out to our people. So I said, I'll buy your paper, homie. And I bought it. And they say, the minister coming next week. You want to see him? And I said, I invited a few homies. Nobody wanted to go with me. So I said, I'm going to go by myself. And it was pretty, I wasn't going to lie, it was pretty intimidating. I went to the
But God wanted you, the Creator wanted you to be there solo for a reason.
Right. That's what I did. So I went to the sports arena, saw all these FYs in the front, all these dudes, and, I'm being proud and shit. I'm like, I ain't going to back down. I'll go in there, So I went in all hard and they frisked me and I went in. I heard the minister, I came out weeping, what I'm saying? And began my transformation that day. And then from there, it led to me going to a place called Red Winds, where I met my first spiritual elder, Ernie Longwalker Peters, and his beautiful wife, Warrior Woman. And they started guiding me in indigenous ceremonies, on indigenous paths. And, that's how I became a member of Quinto Sol. And I was using music at the time to engage brothers and sisters in the lifestyle and plant these seeds.
Yes.
And I started from 94 all the way, up to the 2000. And then I was having my children, and it was crazy. I caught a case for terrorist threats against the sheriff. And that wasn't even terrorist threats. I was actually doing workshops in my garage with brothers from the hood, study groups, really. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know these dudes were investigating me. And they raided my house like you thought I was a dope dealer, and they were trying to charge me with terrorist threats. But thankfully, we had a lawyer named Guillermo Suarez at the time, and people who represent us pro bono that we didn't have. Yeah. We beat those charges. We beat that case. So after that, the elders told me, go low. You got 3 boys, go low. Take care of them. At the time, I got way more than that now. But at the time,
how many do you have now? Because I have 5.
Well, I have 6 biological and 2 stepchildren.
Okay, 7. Yeah, that's a nice number.
8. Well, 8 with the step and 6 with the biological. Yeah. But and I raised them. And I always big point to say, those cats that got kids all over. No, they're with me. I took care of them until they decided to fly the nest on their own. I lived up to my responsibility of my babies. And but in that period, I kind of laid low in a way and worked for my kids. And then 2008, unfortunately, it was a life-changing event that the woman I was with at the time, for whatever her reasons, decided to go, pretty much leave me and the kids. I was raising 4 children by myself for a minute. And in that period, I got depressed. I was working at a paint factory. And I was like, man, I want to raise these 4 kids on my own. So I just walked off the job site. And somebody who remembered me from the study groups I used to run, in fact, someone who remembers seeing me running a study group at Fresno Park at the time with the brothers in that area, remembered me and called me from that community and said, hey, I got this job opportunity I think you'll be good at. Can you do security? And I go, I'm a pretty big dude. I could do security. Yeah. So I thought I was applying for a security job. And it was actually for a teacher's aide at a school site for Soledad and Richard Aguasea. Mm-hmm. And then and it was over there in Manchester in Vermont. And so I was like, wait a minute, this ain't security, it's a teacher's aide. But then I went in and I said, okay, I seen the school and I was like, okay, I get it now, But I went in, it had Buzz from 18, had Hoovers there, A-Tray. At that time, tag banging crew called BAL. And that year, those young people don't even know they had more of an impact on me than the fact that they give me credit on them. Wow. And they helped me come out of my depression, and helping them, I was actually helping myself. It was one of the greatest years. Wow. And those young people really gave me a lot of love. I was able to reduce violence on the school campus and say it took notice. And so they said the following year, will you apply for GRID? And so in 2009, I applied for GRID and became an interventionist. I started working Boa Heights, Lincoln Heights, El Sereno. I was blessed in that decade to do a lot of great things that took notice. And in 2018, Hilda Solis and her people asked if we could pilot an intervention program in East LA.
Yeah.
What she didn't tell me is that I would be going in by myself, literally a team of one, and an area of 35 gangs, not including tag banging crews. But luckily, I was able to show the need and meet the argument. 2019, she funded us completely, and we got a staff of had a staff of additional 2. 2020 COVID came, so we couldn't really grow, but we continued to offer services. And unfortunately, 2020 was such a violent year. We were still doing crisis response and also, giving out food and PPE and all these different things. Still being out there to the point where I ended up in the hospital, almost died in 2020. But thankfully, I'm still here. And so once the quarantine thing started dying down towards the end of 2021, now our team, I'm overseeing a team of 25. And now going from East LA to La Puente.
So from 1 to 25.
Yeah. And expansion, from East LA to La Puente, to Whittier, Pico Vera, Santa Fe Springs. And we just got a contract to start building a pilot program in Almonte.
Yeah.
So, so I've been blessed and continue doing the gig. But how I got into intervention, I say it was divine intervention because I didn't even know this job existed.
Dang, wow.
I just feel I was really placed where God wanted me,
So wow. So right now, you do, I call it like you're like a foot soldier, you literally on the grounds, right? And you're a talented rapper with skills, and your roots, and you educate us. So we're in the city of Inglewood. So, it's right here, Inglewood.
Yeah.
Always up to some good.
I was thinking it's up to good.
Up to some good. And, I know when I was running for mayor, I said to myself, God, when I win, I want to really educate our community of the roots of Inglewood with our Tongva people. So I want you to educate the viewers about the Tongva community. Who are they? Are they a part of us? You know what I mean? Because when I Googled it, it said they come from the Aztecs. So I want you to kind of elaborate on that, because when I ran for office, sometimes, ignorant people come in many colors. It doesn't matter if it could be brown, white, black, whatever. And one person stated to me, which I didn't take offense, because I learned, I read a book called The Bait of Satan, and it's talking about taking offense. And so I don't take offense no more. Before, back in the day, yes, I would. I'm knock you out. But now I'm wiser, and I read that book, and I don't take offense. And the lady said, so you running for mayor? And I said, yes. And she goes, yo, brown people took over Inglewood, so what you gonna do for us black people? And then I said, well, let me give you a little history about Inglewood. And then I elaborated on that, And so I want you to educate the viewers about the roots of our people here before the Europeans came.
Oh, well, I mean, we were always nomadic. We always traveled. We always, intercommunicated. There wasn't these borders. It wasn't even these national titles, saying we were children of the earth, and we were crossing paths all the time, intermixing, traveling, living free, really free. I say, like, a lot of times I hear folks talk about decolonization, and I don't, I attempt to the greatest of my ability to decolonize as much as possible. But I don't have any illusion that I'm ever going to completely be able to decolonize, because I've been programmed since the womb.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? There's complex trauma they're talking about that we've already received before we even come out of our mothers. You know what I'm saying? So, I've been colonized that bad. So I'm trying to the greatest of my ability to the most of my ability. But the fact that I'm even speaking English, and even if I start speaking Spanish, as the sign of my colonization,
Yes, because
these
we're
European
yeah,
tongues,
yeah,
I'm
we're
saying?
not
You know,
our Spanish is not our natural language, and English is
uh,
neither.
and nobody in England, Spain look like me.
Yeah.
And they don't claim us. That's what I was telling folks. They don't claim us. You go to Spain, they call us mestizo, which is not a term of celebration. It's a derogatory term,
Yeah.
based in your mud, your mix, your lesser, and you know how we're lesser when our ancestors raped us by force. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? But they put this. That's what I talk about too. Because a lot of times folks are recognizing this trauma, right, and the traumas that we have, and they go, well, you got to connect it to your childhood. And I said, well, no, let's go beyond that. Because if my parents made me feel lesser,
Yeah.
if my parents devalued me, well, then who taught them that? And how far back does it go to that Española or that colonist that said you were lesser?
Yes.
And 500 years later, we're the aftermath effects of that colonization that still say we're lesser. No, we're not.
Yes.
But they wanted to manipulate and make us believe that so they could put a system in place to control and rule us, right? Which is currently still in place. That
Yes,
Willie
it is.
Lynch letter. But I bring that up because even talking about our Tongva family, it's like we were always family, the tribes. That's why I even tell the brothers a lot of times. In fact, I have a tattooed on my arm. But if I was to claim a barrio, the only barrio I really claim would be a Nahuac. Because a Nahuac is what the Mexica or the Aztecas in Nahuac called the land or the continent. They called it a Nahuac, which is the land between two waters.
Yeah.
So I could be in New York, I could be in Chi-Town, I could be in, Canada, I could be wherever. City of Gods, West Coast, it's on my block because I'm from Manawa. It's the whole continent's ours. Turtle Island, it's our land. I could go anywhere and it's my hood. But this has to be a state of mind. We need to be free like that. We need to understand that when I look at my family, whether they're the indigenous of Canada, whether they identify as Salvadoreño, Guatemalan, Belize, whatever, throughout these great lands, we look similar because we are connected to the same root and the same blood.
Yes.
Maybe different tribes in different regions, but we're familia. So if we came to that understanding, that's probably one of the biggest fears because they say we're the minority, right? But if we came to the understanding that we're family from the north, east, south, we're family. I could go down Brazil as my family. I could go into Chile as my family. I could go into, wherever. I could go into a reservation with the Lakotas and that's my family. Once we realize we're family, oh man, what a political force when we wake up like that, right? But to honor this region where we're at, and I know the missions will call them Gabelinos, and that's the most incorrect term.
Okay.
The family itself, right now, they have their own, and that's always the sad thing where people having their own internal beefs, right?
Yeah.
But the family right now, they there's some of them are identified as Tongva. And in fact, if you look at the LA County seal, it's a Tongva woman that stands in the center. And so some are identifying Tongva, some are identifying as Quiche. And both indigenous terms, from what I understand. But for me, that's my family. They got their own thing they got to work out.
Yeah.
So whether they're identifying as Quiche or whether they're identifying as Tongva, I love them.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I'm going to love them. And we're family. And I pray at some point soon that family works it out and decide how they want to identify. But however they choose to identify, I'm going to respect, I'm going to love, and I'm going to recognize that this was their region of the continent. This was their tierra. I'm a guest. I'm Apache, but I'm a guest in their land. And I thank them for letting me be a guest. And I thank them for opening these lands to all the various different indigenous tribes, whether it identifies Mexican or Salvadorian or Mayan or Huichol or Michica. However they identify, they gave us a home, saying that we're here now.
Yeah.
And the same as our African family. I don't like to say African American because I don't consider myself American.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I know.
We're family and we're on their tierra and on their land, and they are the original people of these lands. And I think one of the greatest inspirations, at least for me, from their community or their tribe or their nation is Toipurina. A lot of
Mhm.
people don't know about Toipurina, but to me, if I was having a conversation with a sister the other day about why they don't educate us enough on these strong women like Lozen or Toipurina or Valentina or Carmen Robles or, Harriet Tubman or, the list goes on and on. But, now they're telling sisters that, well, your power's in your sexuality, right? You got to look Cardi
Yes,
B's and all
yeah, the
this
breast implants,
mustangs,
the
right,
fake
right, right,
butts,
right.
the stripper
And
making
yeah,
the
yeah,
clap
yeah. And
butts.
they're saying
Yeah,
that's your power, right? But when you look at Toipurina, I mean, she was practically walking around naked because she
yeah,
was still connected back then. But the brothers and the sisters, they were such in a different frame of thought and mind on such a higher level that the brothers weren't looking at her like
in
that.
a sexual
You know what I'm
manner.
saying?
Mm-mm.
And she didn't have to use her sexuality to gain power over these brothers.
Yeah,
She was such an intellectual. She was such art. She was so articulate. She was so passionate. She was so connected that her palabra, her voice, carried so much power
Huh.
that she was the war chief. That the brothers followed her to their death, if need be, to go to war with the missionaries, to fight for their freedom, real freedom. See, I don't. That's why I brought up. I don't know. I'll never know what real freedom is. They knew what freedom was. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying? I could. They say we're free here, but free to make a choice off the wall of choices that they placed. That's not freedom.
Yeah.
But they knew it. They were consciously free, really free, and she was so inspiring. It wasn't because they thought they could get with her. They're probably gonna go die because he thinks at the end he might get with his sister, right? She had such influence and power, and we had we connected and such respect for our mothers at that time that we were able to allow ourselves as men to be
Yes.
vulnerable to her leadership and her wisdom, and honor her and respect her, and give her that crown as war chief, and she led us in to combat, whether we survived, captured, or died for the freedom and liberation of our 7 generations. So, and as a woman of that Tongva Kish nation, and I think like if we give our sisters, those kind of inspirations, how much different would it be
Way different.
than it is now? You know
Yeah,
what I'm
way
saying?
different because when you were talking about her, I found little similarities about myself. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Because I don't have to be out there, you know, with my passion.
That's right.
And talking about passion, what is your passion?
My passion. Well, and, getting older now, right? I've been, how can I say, it's in life. I always tell folks, it's like our elders always taught this too. That at least the most developmental period of one's life would be the first 4 cycles of 13. So, obviously, when I was 13 years old, I was not in the same mind frame as when I was 2 or 3.
Yes.
So I was learning my motor skills. I was learning my habits. I was learning all these things within my first 13 years of life. And then from 13 to 26 is probably the most difficult because you're trying to find yourself.
Yes.
And then 26 to 39, they pretty much, whether it was conscious or unconscious, you're going to master whatever you've been building up into that point. And then 39 to 52 is preparing to pass it on, And so in a couple of weeks, I'm going to complete my 4 cycle of 13. So for me, it's like for many decades now, it was, and it still is, but my main passion was my babies, my children, were my motivating force. To motivate me to continue to get up every day to do what I got to do to change, take whatever challenges I need to take, and I did that. But now they're growing. They're leaving the nest. They're so I don't got an SUV no more, right?
Yes, I remember that.
I'm pretty much driving
I remember
alone,
that.
right.
I'm still in my Cadillac Escalade.
My babies are leaving the nest, so that kind of leaving an empty space right here. But it's redefined because in that life, I bring that up that I don't fear death because I've lived and died many times already, and at some point, this physical shell will cease to exist, but the spirit will continue.
Yes.
And so in that, you gotta continue to recreate yourself. You gotta continue to evolve. So now in my passion I'm identifying that it literally now is becoming my mission of what I can do in my small piece to go towards this movement or revolution of change, and the hopes that our seventh generation will see something greater than us, and something that I personally will not see. But my greatest hope would be that I could put something in place or in course that would cause folks to think, and maybe seven generations from us, when they hear words like, trauma, or they hear, homicide or gang violence or substance abuse, or even all these racial terminologies or different forms of identifying yourself now. I think that's one of the things that I'm really feeling, because I think the more titles we create, the more
Yeah.
divided we become. But if we could
Yes.
come together as familia, as family, as human, I think if we could reach that I could accept you, I accept you. Regardless who you are, you're a human, and whatever you choose to be, however you choose to identify, I accept you and I love you.
Yeah.
That, instead of being judgmental, instead of condemning, instead of saying, well, you're wrong or you're right, no, I accept you and I
Yeah.
love you. We could get to that point as a human family, and for our lineage, because even my 18-year-old broke my heart. She already got, this year she came to me, two of my friends got shot and died. And I'm like, man,
Yeah.
she's already going through what I went through.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So I want to reach a period where our lineage doesn't know that.
Yes.
Doesn't know rape, doesn't know molestation, doesn't know.
Yes.
These are like some foreign concepts that they can't even be able to comprehend.
Yes.
So my mission is to work towards that cause of global healing
Yes.
for all humanity, to break away from the sickness of colonization and the current systems in place that do not consider our spirit and our humanity, but only consider what they could suck out of us and what they consume to make a small amount wealth. But let's get back to being family, taking care of the earth and taking care of each other is what I want to work towards. That's my passion now.
Wow. Ooh, okay. Well, before we close off, I do want to mention a rapper that I know that would be great for you to connect with. His name is Gangsta Wish. He's from Inglewood, from the Lock Haven community. And he has good music where it sometimes his beats sound like it's from New York. You know what I mean? But his flow is West Coast, but it's a swag. And I would love to connect you guys, because you guys have like these powerful bars and verses that can just wake up a community, And so shout out to Gangsta Wish. And so with that to say, thank you for educating us. We're going to have a part 2.
Cool.
Because this is not the end. This is not the end. You're full of wisdom and you're very humble, and in this interview, you're very mellow, and that's what you call wisdom. That's what you call wisdom, because most people, they fast when they talk, but you're not like that. You're mellow and it flows and it's full of wisdom. So we will definitely, on Purpose and Passion, have JT back for part 2. So this is Raina Carrillo. I hope JT inspired you on Purpose and Passion, because he sure definitely inspired us in this room. Well, until then, this is Raina Carrillo signing out with Purpose and Passion. Peace, and shout out to West Haven.
Hey, hey.
Until then, bye.